She stood next to her husband, every camera locked on her. But after Jasmine Crockett unsealed her marriage records, just 24 seconds later, Melania Trump could not finish her sentence. There were barely a dozen people left in the chamber when it happened. A quiet Wednesday night had dragged into early Thursday. C-SPAN had cut to a wide shot. Staffers were yawning. The few reporters still awake had unfinished drafts open, assuming the hearing was nearly over. Then Jasmine Crockett said, for unexpected words, "I move to unseal." No one reacted at first, not until she repeated herself. Louder this time, sliding a folder across the desk to the committee clerk. The camera zoomed in slowly. Someone whispered in the background, "She's serious." Chairwoman Lynn Caro frowned, clearly caught off guard. "This document," Jasmine began, her voice steady and measured, "relates to a sealed civil filing. Submitted in 2021, it includes a request for post-nuptial changes from Mrs. Melania Trump, made while her husband was still President of the United States." Now people looked up. You could almost hear the sudden clatter of typing, phones lighting up, heads turning. This wasn't about budgets or infrastructure. It was deeply personal, presidential personal. A man at the back, New Hampshire Republican Declan Foster, tried to object, but Jasmine was already speaking again. The petitioner, Melania Noss. Trump respectfully seeks changes to the postnuptial agreement, mainly concerning protection of assets tied to foreign investments and estate planning. The request came from ongoing fears about risks caused by her husband's political, business, and personal issues. The mood shifted. Her voice was calm, but had force behind it. She wasn't performing. She was guiding the room through what looked like dry legal material. Estate law, asset protection. But the meaning behind it was louder than the words. The Melanian had tried to redefine the terms of her marriage while Trump was still in office. Now it was public. Jasmine had not leaked anything illegally, else she used a little-known rule that allows sealed material to be disclosed if it is part of an active ethics investigation. And that is exactly what this was. Just 72 hours earlier, the Ethics Committee launched a formal inquiry into unreported foreign assets tied to the Trump family, properties in Slovenia and Dubai missing from mandatory financial disclosure forms. No one thought Jasmine would tie Melanian's post-nup to that, but she did. And she timed her pauses just right before reading again. The next section described private meetings Melania held with outside legal counsel in Reno, Nevada. The filings expressed concern about being held responsible for actions she neither knew about nor participated in. Even more damaging, a fear of being exposed due to her husband's disregard for legal processes. That line would headline the next day's news. Even the chair couldn't hide her reaction, but Jasmine kept reading. Not rushing, not dragging, just steady enough that every word landed. Reporters started whispering into their phones. An aide handed a note to the chair. Someone on Twitter posted a live-transcribed quote, and then, without any warning, the committee feed went national. CNN switched to live coverage. MSNBC joined in, a Fox News producer, unsure what was happening, but sensing something big, threw a chyron on screen, breaking Melania Trump post-nup unsealed, live from the House floor. Thousands watched, then millions. Meanwhile, across town in the East Room of the White House, Melania Trump was seated beside her husband during a scheduled press briefing on farm subsidies. The setting had been calm. The president was leading the conversation. Melania had just a short speech prepared. That is when a reporter called out, "Madam First Lady, any comment on the newly unsealed court document?" She blinked, then blinked again. You could see it in real time, her fingers tightening around a note card. She began reading her statement, but stumbled over the second sentence. She started over, mispronounced a word, then fell silent. People noticed. She leaned closer to the microphone again, but this time only whispered, "No comment," before stepping away from the podium. It took just 24 seconds from the reporter's question to her exit. Those 24 seconds would loop endlessly on the news. But the real story wasn't just in her silence. It was in who caused that silence in the first place. The video of Melania Hesitating, struggling, and walking away didn't just go viral, it detonated. News shows clipped it apart, zoomed in on her eyes, her hands, even the slight shake in her voice. It ran on every major channel that night, followed by panel discussions and body language experts trying to interpret what it all meant. But those 24 seconds revealed something deeper, something more personal. She hadn't expected this. Day had been like any other. She'd spent the morning in a private meeting with the president and agricultural lobbyists, and gone for hair and makeup. Just like any scheduled appearance, she had been prepped on drought relief and handed a simple message to share: hope, strength, unity. No one had mentioned Jasmine Crockett or an unsealed file. Melania had not checked her phone since early afternoon. So when the reporter's voice suddenly echoed across the room, she was caught between habit and protocol. She could not lie, not outright, not with every camera aimed at her. But staying silent would only raise more questions. Her team tried to step in, but she had already left the stage. She walked through the double doors, passing two Secret Service agents who shared a concerned glance. One of them immediately radioed in from the press room. The energy in the room flipped. Porters sensed something bigger was happening. We're no longer covering a document. They were witnessing a real-time reaction. Personal, unfiltered. Reaction from the First Lady of the United States. And suddenly, the story shifted. It was no longer about one line in a filing. It became about what Melania chose not to say. Back in the committee room, Jasmine Crockett did not smile. She did not make sharp comments or scripted remarks. She simply closed the folder, looked at the chair and asked, "May this be entered into the public record?" There was a brief pause before the chair replied, "So moved." That was it. C-SPAN cut the feed about a minute later. The room emptied fast, but online in Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, clips of the moment were already everywhere. Hashtags appeared. Hashtag post NUP 20-1. Hashtag MELANIA walks off. Hashtag Crockett UNSEALED. One video, recorded from someone's phone in a diner in Eugene, Oregon, captured a server gasping and whispering, "She's got guts." Meanwhile, Jasmine's office was buzzing. Staff took nonstop calls. Interview requests came in from all sides. CNN wanted her on air within the hour. MSNBC booked her for the next morning. Even global networks, Germany's ZDF, France 24 asked for statements. But Jasmine stayed put. She declined every offer that night. Instead, she went back to her small condo in Arlington, heated some leftover pasta, and sat on the edge of her couch, shoes still on. Her phone would not stop buzzing. She finally picked up one call from her mother in Dallas. "You okay, baby?" Her mom asked softly. "I'm fine, Mama," Jasmine said, tired but confident. Her mother paused. "They are going to come. For you now, I know," Jasmine replied. But I did not lie. Across town, the West Wing was in full damage control. Staff were scrambling to draft responses. Trump was furious not just at Jasmine, but at whoever allowed that document to be released. "Find the lawyer who signed off on this," he shouted during a closed-door meeting. Melania, on the other hand, remained quiet. She skipped dinner. She did not return calls. She went straight to the private residence and asked to be left alone. According to someone close to the family, she took a long bath, changed into one of her old New York robes, and sat by the window for nearly 2 hours silent. Understood this was not going away. The next morning, major newspapers across the country ran versions of the same headline. First Lady's legal filing during presidency revealed N. Crockett. Sparks public discussion. Smaller headlines used words like independence, autonomy, and self-protection over and over. For once, people were not talking about Melania Trump's fashion choices or her quiet presence. They were asking real questions. Why did she file this request? What was she trying to protect herself from? And why did it take someone like Jasmine Crockett to make it public? While the nation debated what Melania's silence meant, Jasmine knew this was just the beginning. 3 weeks earlier, Jasmine Crockett had sat across from her chief legal advisor. Arms folded, eyes locked on one line in a redacted ethics report. It was not the kind of thing that made headlines. The reference was buried in Appendix D part of a dull audit of Trump Foundation financials. But Jasmine spotted something others had missed, a mention of an offshore account reassignment dated May 2021. What made it unusual was that the account was not linked to Donald Trump but to Melania. Stranger still, it lined up with a series of sealed civil filings in Nevada, an odd choice for someone living in Washington, D.C. It took her team 9 more days to connect the dots. But when they did, all roads led to one file, a private petition from Melania Trump, not to end her marriage, but to separate herself from Trump's foreign property risks. Jasmine kept the information to herself for almost 24 hours. She understood how it would look, a political move, a personal attack. But that was not her aim, so it was not about drama, not for her. She kept circling back to the deeper issue. If the First Lady, while her husband was still in office, took legal action to distance herself from his financial risks, what did that say about the integrity of the executive branch? This isn't about the marriage, she told her team. During a closed prep session, it's about the power, the pressure, the fear, and yes, there were big risks. She knew the criticism would come. They would say she was targeting another woman, intruding on a marriage, acting out of self-interest. She could already imagine the Fox News panel calling her angry, reckless, maybe worse. They would talk about how she looked, how she spoke. Where she was from, it always came back to the same tired script, but this time felt different. This was a woman trying to avoid being dragged down with everything else. Jasmine believed that was important. Her team was divided. One aide, a 26-year-old legislative fellow from Spokane, warned, "This could blow everything up, even if you're right." But another, a former Obama-era ethics advisor, said, "If you are going to move, this is your chance. You might not get another one." So Jasmine reached out to an old friend in Reno, a careful, no-nonsense attorney who still owed her from her civil rights days in Texas. He confirmed it.
Melania had filed the request.
It had been sealed immediately, but he had seen the docket number. It was real. Now came the legal question. Jasmine was not going to leak it. That was never her approach. But there was a rarely used ethics sub-rule in the House that allowed sealed documents to be presented if they were directly tied to an ongoing government ethics review. It had to be introduced during a session, publicly and on the record. She waited. She sat through hearings full of the usual routine, foreign investments, shell company gaps, compliance checklists, dry details that rarely got noticed, until she spoke up. The second she said, "I move to unseal," she knew this was the point of no return. Less than a full day later, her office had received over 200 press requests. Her name was trending everywhere. Supporters praised her courage. Critics called her calculated. But Jasmine had been in the system long enough not to care about social media noise. She wanted to talk about power, about how even women in high positions sometimes had to use legal tools just to breathe safely. She had not grown up in political circles. Her roots were in South Dallas public schools, long days at her mom's salon, volunteer work in packed courtrooms. She remembered how often the powerful avoided consequences, how a name or a title was enough to slide past accountability. Melania Trump, to her, was not the same. She wasn't chasing votes or rewriting her past. She was trying to protect herself quietly. No one would have known unless Jasmine had followed the trail. But now that it had unraveled, Jasmine knew the next move was not hers. It would come from inside the White House. By early morning, the West Wing was already feeling the pressure. Its Chief of Staff Bradley Knorr, one of the few still there from the campaign's early days, paced outside the Situation Room, phone pressed to his ear, snapping at whoever was on the line. Every few minutes, aides brought more printouts, tweets, headlines, news transcripts, screenshots of broadcast tickers. They all shared the same message. The First Lady had tried to protect herself behind the scenes. Donald Trump was furious, not shocked, just angry. One staffer later leaked that he yelled for half an hour, not about the document he had known. It existed, but about the timing, the exposure, and that Jasmine Crockett had dragged Melania into it. "She wants attention," he reportedly said, throwing a pen across the resolute desk. "I'll give her attention." I'll make her famous. Melania said little in that meeting. She sat quietly, arms crossed, jaw tight, listening as the room argued around her. When asked if she wanted to issue a response, she shook her head. Not yet, she said softly. Not until I know what was actually shared. That unsettled the group. The document included more than just a request. The wording around legal risk and foreign holdings struck a nerve. Even a small misunderstanding could raise questions. About business ties the Trump family had never made public. The legal team met in the Roosevelt Room before lunch. One senior advisor, Gilbert Perolder, gray-haired, drained, laid out the issue clearly. We can't prove what her motive was, he told them. She filed this to protect herself, and that protection is connected to your business, then that implies she believed there was real legal risk. Trump frowned. So she's selling me out to save herself? Parr said nothing. Melania stayed in the residence for most of the day. Her assistant Alenka brought tea and a stack of news articles. Melania read them with no reaction. One photo appeared again and again, her holding a note card, eyes slightly wide, mid-sentence. Do you regret it? Alenka asked softly, kneeling beside her. Melania took a moment before answering. I regret that it's public, she said. I do not regret protecting myself. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett. She sat quietly in a corner booth at a small cafe in Arlington, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. Wearing a hoodie and jeans, she hoped to stay unnoticed. It didn't work. A man at the counter recognized her. He didn't say a word, just gave her a thumbs up as he walked out. She didn't smile. Her mind was already on what might happen next, because she knew pushback was coming, and she was right. By evening, conservative op-eds flooded the internet. Blogs questioned her motives, accusing her of trying to break up a marriage for political gain. TV pundits replayed clips of Jasmine at past hearings, calling her dramatic, attention-seek, again and reckless. One anchor smirked and said she should focus on her district instead of dragging the First Lady into controversy. But not everyone agreed. An editorial in the Los Angeles Times argued Jasmine Crockett had not exposed Melania Trump. She had exposed a deeper truth, that even women with power are not immune to the risks of unchecked influence. In Pittsburgh, a small group of college students held a rally. They carried signs that read, "Truth matters even when it's personal." On Instagram, younger voters shared Jasmine's speech with captions like, "She said it calmly, but she said it clearly." Still, the White House wasn't finished. The next day, a senior advisor leaked an email to the Washington Examiner claiming Jasmine had twisted sealed records for political theater. It was a bluff. No laws were broken, but it sparked another media cycle. Back in her office, Jasmine's press secretary asked if she wanted to respond. "Nope," Jasmine replied. "Let them spin. I'm not answering lies with headlines." While the media buzzed, a quieter story was starting to emerge. One Melania had tried to keep buried long before the press conference, before the stumble at the podium, and well before Jasmine ever touched that sealed file. There had been a trail. Melania left it behind carefully, not by accident. She was cautious, but paper leaves traces. In early spring 2021, Melania took 3 low-profile trips that weren't listed in official schedules. One to Reno, one to Zurich, and one quick, quiet stop in Miami, where she met with Martin Siculo, a retired international finance attorney. Her team booked under aliases, avoided luxury hotels, and ensured the press never caught wind. No limos, no public appearances. Media. Just one woman moving quietly through spaces she never fully trusted. The Reno trip was the key moment. That's where the paper trail began. The attorney Shemetzeline Duran had handled international tax cases for casino executives. In Las Vegas, she wasn't well known, but she was methodical, and she understood how to build legal shields, not hideouts. Melania told her she needed to protect herself, not because of infidelity, not because she was leaving, but because, in her words, "I'm afraid of being held responsible for things I was not part of." That line stuck with Celine. She even wrote it down. They spoke for nearly 5 hours behind a locked door in a law office tucked into a strip mall. No sign, no website. After the story went public, Celine told reporters Melania seemed anxious but composed. She wasn't trying to be clever. She was trying to stay safe. In Zurich, she met a banker who handled low-profile asset transfers. That meeting lasted just 40 minutes, but it was enough to confirm how complicated things had become.
Oh, the Trump
Empire wasn't just real estate and golf courses. It was a maze of shell firms, offshore deals, license sharing, and unnamed investors. Melania didn't have a law degree, but she could understand the risk, and it wasn't only about her. She worried that her son could end up entangled, that everything she had tried to keep clear could get pulled into something messier. She wasn't naive. She had been close enough to see which issues she could handle and which ones could drown her. So she acted. Celine wrote the filing carefully, flagging risk without pointing fingers. There were no claims of illegal acts, just concern, caution, and a formal intent to protect herself. The document was filed in Nevada. Within 36 hours, it was sealed. That's standard for personal legal records tied to public figures. No one expected it to show up again, especially not Melania. And certainly not years later, during an obscure ethics hearing led by someone she had never met. But real life doesn't follow anyone's timeline. Back in the present, while the media searched for details, Jasmine Crockett's team quietly confirmed the link. Her lead researcher, Jaden Gwynn, had tracked the travel and matched it to hard-to-find docket entries in the Washoe County system. Jasmine never asked how she managed it. She's just that sharp, Jasmine told a friend over the phone later that night. But for Jasmine, this wasn't about attention or headlines. It was about uncovering truths that had been kept hidden, truths those in power believed would never come out. Jasmine reflected on the many women she had encountered over the years, clients who signed papers they never fully understood, who bore the consequences of decisions made by others, who stayed silent because they were told that keeping quiet was the proper thing to do. Melania was not just like them, but in this particular way, maybe she was. She had not shouted. She had not pointed fingers. She had simply tried to protect herself the best way she could. That meant something. The public, however, had not seen that part of the story yet. All they had were quick clips from a press conference and a few trending words online. But gradually, more substantial details began to surface. A blog entry from a former legal assistant in Reno confirmed Melania's visit. Finance report from Zurich suggested a flagged wire transfer around the same time. And a short article by a local Miami journalist mentioned a closed-door meeting between Melania and a retired attorney known for his knowledge of global financial holdings. None of these reports were definitive by themselves, but taken together, they revealed a pattern. Melania was not planning an exit from her marriage. She was attempting to create a boundary. Jasmine Crockett had revealed that boundary using official channels. Still, sympathy alone did not steer the direction of power. Control did. And in Washington, there were still many eager to reclaim control. Just hours after Jasmine's decision to reveal the document, political operatives were already shaping their version of events. Their first move? Cast doubt. If they could not deny the document's existence, they could at least question how it became public. By mid-morning, conservative media had adopted a phrase that stuck: the leak. Fox News aired a segment labeled, "Crockett weaponizes sealed filing. How did she get it?" Talk shows were soon filled with callers demanding an inquiry. One clip of a commentator named Julian Frey made the rounds online. "This was stolen," he said. "You do not just come across sealed documents unless someone breaks a law." But Jasmine had broken no laws. That part of the story did not spark the same interest as the spin. The following day, in a quiet outdoor press briefing outside her district office, Jasmine stood behind a line of microphones. She wore no formal suit. There was no scripted speech, just a manila folder and her steady voice. "I did not leak anything," she began. "This did not come from an anonymous tip. This was a sealed document linked to an active ethics review about unreported foreign assets." She paused, opened the folder, and held up a printed excerpt. From the House Subcommittee's Rules, Section 6.4, titled Legal Disclosure. "When documents connect to ongoing oversight duties, I followed protocol. It was disclosed during a live hearing on record, under existing law. No dramatis process. Still, reporters fired off questions. Why Melania? Why now? Was this politically motivated? Coordinated with the Biden administration? Her answers did not change. I did not seek this out, she said. It came to my attention while reviewing financial statements. The document was valid and within scope. That is my role. She did not mention the Reno trip, or Zurich, or Miami. Those parts remained unspoken. Jasmine wanted the public to concentrate on one issue, that the First Lady had taken personal legal steps to separate herself from the president's financial reach. Yes, that was significant. But television debates were rarely built for depth, so while Jasmine shared the facts, commentators leaned into stories. Headlines were filled with words like leak, scheme, and setup. Inside the White House, officials scrambled to adjust. They had hoped the controversy would be drowned out by noise, but Jasmine's composed delivery complicated that strategy. She had not stumbled. She had not dodged questions. She had not hesitated when asked directly. Did you reveal this out of personal bias? No, Jasmine said. But I do believe that when anyone tries to quietly protect themselves from abusive influence and is then punished for it, that is a serious concern. And if we refuse to talk about it, we are part of the problem. That quote echoed across news platforms. Supporters applauded her for staying clear-headed. Critics accused her of turning female empowerment into a political tactic. Even questioned her selective approach, arguing that it was convenient she went after a former model with a foreign accent rather than the central figure, Donald Trump. But Jasmine was not moved by those accusations. She had encountered worse. What did trouble her was the complete silence from across the aisle. Not a single Republican representative reached out. No questions, no debate, not even private concern about the ethics issues raised. Instead, they worked quietly behind the scenes. One Republican aide leaked a draft for a resolution aimed at formally reprimanding her. Another circulated internal notes suggesting an investigation into her conduct around sealed legal records. The notes left out the very rule Jasmine had referenced publicly. Still, perception often overshadowed reality. Later that night, Jasmine received a phone call that stood out. Representative Crockett. Yes, she replied. This is Meredith Grantham from the St. Louis Sentinel. Off the record, someone from the ethics office revealed they had been told not to talk about the chain of custody regarding the filings. They were nervous. They said the pressure was coming from a level far above the party. Jasmine paused. Far up, they would not say, but mentioned a term protective insulation. Jasmine had only heard that phrase once before, during an inquiry into foreign money linked to shell companies tied to the Kushner network. That made her sit up. She thanked the reporter and ended the call. As more facts emerged, Jasmine realized. The story was no longer just about a post-nup. It had become about who wanted to keep the First Lady from speaking and why. By Friday morning, the atmosphere in the Capitol had shifted. People were not just walking, they were moving with purpose. Office doors stayed shut longer. Conversations became hushed. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a headline. She was now part of high-level strategy sessions, internal briefings, and urgent damage control on both political sides. A junior staffer in Senator Roland Quill's office accidentally left behind a printed memo on a Senate lounge printer. A cleaner noticed it and took a photo. It read, "Do not comment publicly on Crockett. Shift to procedural language. If asked about the First Lady, call it personal, not political." They were not afraid of Jasmine herself. They were afraid of what her actions had uncovered. Across the country, public response was sharp. In Sacramento, demonstrators gathered at the Capitol Annex. Their signs read, "Transparency is not treason." Many were not longtime supporters of Jasmine. Some had only just learned her name. But they were upset by the silence, the misleading spin, and the idea that a First Lady could try to take quiet legal steps in, be branded dramatic for it. In Pittsburgh, another kind of crowd appeared, dressed in suits, calm and calculated. They stood at microphones and claimed Jasmine was tearing apart the private sanctity of marriage. One pastor, speaking on his radio show while holding a Bible, said the scandal was just the latest attempt to erode the country's moral foundation. Jasmine's name was no longer just in news reports, it was in sermons, op-eds, and casual conversations. In checkout lines, the division was growing deeper by the hour. Inside Congress, tensions exploded during a closed-door ethics subcommittee meeting. Representative Calvin Dreyer, a Republican from Nebraska, accused Jasmine of using the personal life of a first lady to gain attention. Jasmine remained calm. "Do you think protecting yourself is a private matter?" she asked, arms folded. "It is none of your concern," he replied. "It becomes everyone's concern," she said, "when the woman closest to the most powerful man on earth tries to legally distance herself from his financial control. It is my concern when you pretend that is not alarming." That exchange leaked nearly word for word and was widely quoted. By that afternoon, clips from past hearings reappeared Jasmine, questioning CEOs, pressing law enforcement on civil rights. Critics said she was calculated, even confrontational. But for growing numbers of Americans, she was something else, someone who did not back down. That night, Senator Gloria Estabrook, senior Democrat, not known for taking risks, made a rare appearance on a local Wilmington radio show. "First, I was unsure about Crockett's methods," she admitted. "But I read the filing. I saw the procedures were followed. And frankly, if a first lady believed she had to shield herself from her own husband's finances, that is a discussion worth having, not something we should punish others for exposing." Her comments shifted the narrative. By Saturday morning, the story had momentum again, but now the focus had widened. It was no longer just about Jasmine. It was about the document, about why Melania filed it, about what she may have known and feared. On an MSNBC panel, legal experts began making connections. A Georgetown ethics lawyer noted how the language in Melania's filing mirrored that used in past cases involving hidden foreign assets and financial distancing. A former Treasury analyst quietly confirmed that protective repositioning had come up before, in cases where spouses of government officials believed they were being used as cover in questionable financial dealings. In other words, Melania had not been imagining things. She had been calculating. And Jasmine had not surprised the country. She had forced it to face what it was ignoring that weekend. Jasmine agreed to only one interview with a small independent podcast based in Minneapolis. Asked why she chose them over major outlets like CNN or the Washington Post, she answered plainly, "They've been reporting on corruption and asset hiding for years, long before anyone cared what I had to say." The host asked if she feared what might happen next. Of course, Jasmine said, "But I am more afraid of what happens when we stop naming things for what they are." While Jasmine worked to take back the story, the silence from Melania began to crack, and the world was about to hear directly from her. The announcement came quietly, no press release, no formal memo from the White House, just a short teaser posted online by PBS NewsHour journalist Alyssa Chen. The interview had already been recorded, filmed in a private home in Arlington, far from the media attention of Pennsylvania Avenue. The teaser read, "First Lady Melania Trump speaks exclusively about the 2021 postnuptial filing." Still image showed her on a cream couch, hands calmly resting in her lap, eyes steady, no stylist, no official symbols, no window, a window, and silence. The full interview aired at 7 p.m. sharp. Viewers watched quietly. Some expected a denial. Others assumed a carefully worded counter. What they saw was something entirely different. Melania began by confirming the filing. "Yes," she said, "I submitted the petition. And yes, I did it while my husband was still in office." Her accent was clear, her tone steady. In hand, she explained she had been advised by legal counsel to separate her personal finances from those linked to foreign properties and offshore accounts. Not because she feared her husband, but because she did not trust the system around them. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She did not ask for empathy. Instead, she spoke about the weight of being in the spotlight, how even with status, she felt cornered by the machinery of government. She spoke of accounts she had never heard of, properties she had never visited, and deals she was asked to sign without understanding. "I was not a lawyer," she said. "I was a wife who did not want her name tied to things she could not explain, Then came the moment no one expected. Melania said she had watched Jasmine Crockett's committee meeting live. Her phone had buzzed during the hearing. Her aide had shown her the video. "I was surprised," she said, but not upset. The interviewer, caught off guard, asked her to clarify. "I always thought someone would come across it eventually," she said. "And I hoped they would understand what I was trying to do." She did. That moment cut through political lines. Jasmine's supporters shared the clip instantly. Even some opponents paused. Melania continued, describing how alone she felt in 2021, how she reached out to lawyers without informing most of her husband's team. She asked for privacy not out of guilt, but because she knew how the press and her party might twist her actions. "I was not trying to leave him," she said. "I was trying to walk away from the parts of the presidency I never agreed to carry." The full interview ran just 19 minutes, but it changed everything. Suddenly, this was no longer a scandal. It was a story of self-preservation. It was no longer about party lines. It was about personal safety. In that short conversation, Melania gave Jasmine something powerful, not a partnership, not a viral moment, but quiet confirmation. What Jasmine had exposed was not made up. It was a decision. A woman trying to hold her world together before it crumbled. That night, social media exploded. "She did understand," began trending worldwide. News shows quickly changed their coverage. Even conservative analysts who had criticized Jasmine earlier began shifting. "Maybe she found something worth examining," one admitted live. "Maybe she deserves more credit than we gave her." Jasmine did not post a statement. She did not celebrate. She simply wrote one line on her profile. "Sometimes telling the truth means walking alone until someone else speaks." Melania's team confirmed no further comments would follow. No more interviews, no clarifications, one time only. And somehow, that made it resonate even more. In the days after, women across the country started sharing their own stories, not about politics, but about quietly securing their futures. Legal boundaries, financial questions. Seeking understanding before signing anything, the topic had changed. And as the nation began listening, the people who had tried to quiet Jasmine started facing scrutiny themselves. They were not ready for it. Once Melania's interview aired, everything at the Capitol shifted, though not immediately in public. Behind the scenes, there was a different energy. Lawmakers who had avoided the issue or openly criticized Jasmine went quiet. Their spokespersons stopped offering opinions. Congressional staff began setting up private, off-the-record conversations. It was no longer about killing the story. It was about how to respond to the fallout. By Tuesday morning, Jasmine's inbox was packed again, not just with public support, but with outreach from politicians who had avoided her just a week earlier. Some even asked to meet with her team too, learn about her methods. One of the most surprising messages came from Senator West Hollow, a moderate from Ohio, who had once dismissed Jasmine as attention-seeking. He asked for a meeting in private. "I did not realize what you were showing us," he said once they met. "You did not just reveal a document. You revealed the fear that lives under all this power." Jasmine nodded but did not react to the compliment. "That fear has always been here," she said. "We have just been trained not to call it what it is." Elsewhere, Trump's legal team scrambled to control what came next. A statement issued through the family's lawyer played down Melania's comments. It called them personal reflections, not legal statements, and blamed the media for misinterpreting her words. But by then, it was already too late. The story had taken on a life of its own. At the same time, Jasmine's appearance on 60 Minutes was scheduled, not because she had pushed for it, but because producers could not ignore the flood of requests from viewers asking them to feature her. Sitting across from veteran reporter Paige Brannon, Jasmine did not hold back. Melania was not trying to start a political storm, she said. She was trying to quietly separate herself from financial risks that did not belong to her. Acted with more clarity than many elected officials I have seen. Brannon leaned in, curious. "Do you think she was worried about legal consequences?" "I think she was afraid of being caught in something she did not create," Jasmine answered. And that fear should have raised alarms for everyone paying attention back then. Clips from the segment went viral. But what mattered more was that they reached the people Jasmine most wanted to reach. Civic education groups began designing resources to teach about financial independence within marriage, especially in high-profile situations. Ethics departments at universities hosted open discussions. One podcast episode titled "The Post-Up: The Shift in Politics" gained over 6 million downloads in less than a week. Then something happened that Jasmine had not seen coming. A handwritten note arrived. No envelope, just her name and office. Address scribbled in neat cursive on the back of a folded sheet of printer paper. Inside it read, "I watched, I listened, and I cried. You did not just see her. You saw all of us, who did the right thing quietly and still got accused of betrayal. Thank you." No signature. She read it more than once, then placed it in her desk drawer beside a photo of her late aunt, the one who had marched for voting rights decades ago for the first time in a while. Jasmine was not fighting to be noticed. She was moving with purpose, and people were beginning to take notice. But not everyone. In certain committee spaces, quiet talk grew louder. There were conversations about whether Jasmine had used procedural rules to force the unsealing of the documents. The argument was weak, but in politics, it did not take facts to stir controversy, just volume. Closed-door meetings increased. Some political strategists floated the idea of introducing a reprimand resolution. It's just enough to stain her record and slow her growing public support. One insider, speaking anonymously to a reporter, confirmed the strategy. The goal is not to remove her. The goal is to remind her that she is not untouchable. Jasmine expected pushback. What she did not expect was who would push back against it. Representative Karen Dale, a Republican from Kansas known for her quiet, moderate approach, released a public statement defending Jasmine's right to present relevant legal materials during oversight hearings. Feeling uncomfortable, Dale wrote, is not the same as wrongdoing. Crockett followed the rules. If we start punishing people for that, we are not upholding ethics, we are weakening them. The House was stunned. Jasmine read the quote aloud to her team and smiled for the first time in a week. But the moment was not about proving herself right. It was about how truth had carved out space, and what that space could mean for others, still afraid to speak up. 2 weeks after the story broke, the public attention had begun to settle. News cycles moved on. Cable debates returned to the usual. Back and forth, life as always kept going. But something had shifted. Jasmine could feel it. She noticed it in the quiet moments riding the elevator alone in the Cannon House office building, sitting at her desk before anyone else arrived. Passing by security guards who offered a small nod instead of making small talk, the mood had changed. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was recognition. Not everyone agreed with what she had done. That had never been her goal. But even those who had disagreed were no longer acting like she did not have a place at the table. Jasmine had done was not just expose a document. She had exposed a system one that expected women like Melania to stay quiet, when women like her to pay a price for speaking up. She had not leaked anything. She had not put on a show. She had followed the rules. Yet she was called reckless, dramatic, even dangerous. But once Melania spoke, the story shifted, because it was no longer about politics. It became about survival, about the difficult space. Women are forced and too loyal but alert, present but uninvolved, supportive, but never allowed to ask questions. Jasmine had pointed it out. And in the days that followed, more people stepped forward, some loud, others barely above a whisper. A former White House staffer emailed her office anonymously, saying, "Thank you for not making us feel like we imagined it." A retired judge from Oregon wrote to recall a case where a political wife was left with a $1.2 million debt after her husband's quiet fraud conviction. She did not see it coming, the judge wrote, because she was told not to ask. Even in high school civics classes, teachers had begun using the story as a case study in public accountability. A clip of Jasmine reading the unsealed document was shown during a mock ethics debate in Santa Fe. A student stood up and said, "Did not know someone could be that strong in real life." But Jasmine did not feel strong, at least not inside. What she felt was exhausted, tired of always being the one expected to speak, tired of being asked if she was certain, tired of needing someone else, someone like Melania, to say it first before anyone believed her. Even so, she would not take anything back. The event had not only increased her political visibility, it had sharpened her focus. Focus on what the role truly demanded. Focus on how often women were pushed into silence when their personal judgment did not fit with public expectations. Focus on how critical it was to show up, even when you feel like the only one who notices what is going on. When asked later at an ethics seminar what advice she would give to future leaders, she paused, then said, "Do not wait for a scandal to start doing your job, and do not wait for approval before protecting those whose voices have not been heard. Sometimes truth does not shout. Sometimes it is just buried in dull legal language that no one bothers to check. But it still counts." The crowd clapped, but Jasmine did not smile. She looked at her papers, then back at them because she knew there would be more stories like this. Another woman blamed for something she did not do. Another official told she was out of line. Another time when someone would need to choose, speak out, or stay quiet. Jasmine had already chosen. Whether people supported her or not, they remembered her. That, for now, was enough. If you were watching this and wondering whether you would have spoken up, ask yourself, are you waiting for the right time more? Are you willing to be the reason change starts? This made you pause, talk about it, share it, and make sure you subscribe. Stories like these may stay, but people vanish. Stay aware, stay engaged. See you next time.